Five, four, three, two, one. We are live. The crossover show continues. Brent Leary, CRM Essentials, is back for more. How we doing?
Is it back for more, or I'm over to you for more? Is that how it
over
goes?
to me? It's a good question. Well, we assigned our characters yesterday, so I guess we could stick with that. The homicide, Law and Order vibe. I was Frank Pembleton because he and I look alike. And you were Lenny Briscoe, right?
I was Lenny because we look so much alike.
Exactly. So anyhow, for those of you who missed out on yesterday, we had a really good discussion around hybrid events. Brent had me in the hot seat, talk creative event design, tried to give my motivational speech, better events. And but today we're going to talk workplace data privacy to kick off, which is that was the teaser, Brent. We teased this real nice, I thought.
Yeah, we had to give them a little something to actually make the crossover happen. So
exactly. And the thing is, look, I know probably some of you out there are like, oh man, data privacy. We'll talk about that again. This is going to be cutting edge stuff because Brent's got fresh data, fresh research. And so we're going to get into this, I think, from some different angles than maybe you've heard before. So I think that's going to be cool. And then to complete the crossover action, I'm going to ask Brent a bit about the art of enterprise video, because if you haven't figured it out by now, Brent does video. If you hang out on LinkedIn, you're going to see Brent live on video. You too can crash his shows like I do with pesky comments. Brent, it was really funny actually the other day, Brent, because I visited your show where your CRM Players, which is one of your main gigs with Paul, where you guys get some big audiences. You were saying goodbye to Nicole France, who was your player in residence for a while. And I was all like getting snarky on the live stream. And it took me a while to realize it wasn't a live stream, because I was like, why is Brent ignoring me?
You were watching the replay.
Yeah, I was on replay, dude. It was 2 hours later. But anyhow,
wait a minute.
Anyhow, I added my comments to that, but
yeah.
So okay, so and just to get this little piece out of the way, Brent did some research on this for Zoho on workplace data privacy. Zoho is a Diginomica partner. I don't ordinarily feature partners in my videos, but I'm doing it this time because that's the research that Brent did. So hey, if you don't like that, bail out now. But hey, most videos on LinkedIn are pretty well sponsored by someone. But this video is not, but I just wanted to just be the full disclosure route. This is a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. And if you dig into Zoho, you'll find that they've actually taken some fairly extraordinary investments to avoid the privacy conundrums that other companies have found themselves in, including building a lot of their own tools, pulling the plug on Google Analytics, building their own AI tools completely so as to not rely on any third-party AI. That's pretty hardcore stuff there. So I think they should be taken seriously on this topic. Anyhow, Brent, you did this really interesting customer data privacy report with Zoho, which folks can find online. We should probably pop a link to that at some point. But then you also had a bunch of video chats with these folks. And then there's also been all these industry developments, like the whole Google Chrome with the whole getting rid of third-party cookies. And then, oh, wait, we're gonna hold off on that for a little bit. So what do you make? What do you make of all these developments? What are you learning?
Well, I think the main thing is that privacy is starting to become an issue from a consumer standpoint, because they're learning more about it. And I think the more they learn, the more they realize, oh, my God, I had no idea all this stuff was going on with my data. And so I think it really picked up steam when Apple rolled out the 14.5 iOS update, which turned off default opt-in. So now when an app developer, wants you to use their app, now they have to put up a pop-up sign saying, hey, we want to use your data. Is it okay if we use your data in order for, to make a better experience? But some of them don't really know how to say that part yet. They just want to use, they know that we want to use your data part. They don't know the good reason from a consumer perspective of why we should let them use our data. So they have to get used to that part. So Apple did that. And then, of course, like you said, Google said that Chrome is going to phase out third-party cookies. And now last week they said, well, we're going to phase them out, but not for another, 2 years, before we thought we were going to do it. So I think privacy is becoming a bigger issue for everyone. But from a consumer standpoint, they're learning more, and the more they hear, the more they don't like what they hear. And now companies, vendors, technology providers, everybody is going to have to account for it, because now the cat is out of the bag. They're not going to go back, to being less knowledgeable of what's going on with their data. It's only getting more and more knowledgeable, which is causing more and more issues for vendors and technology providers all around.
Absolutely. Quick shout out to Sheldon Snodgrass. Thanks for the kind comment. Sheldon's from old school previous alliances that I've had, taught me more about sales than anyone else on the planet. Guy knows sales and sales training. Thank you, Sheldon. I'll never be a great salesperson, but man, I've gotten a friggin' hell of a lot better thanks to you. So nice to see you in the chat. Yeah, as far as this is concerned, Brent, I think one of the really interesting things that came out of your report is that companies get put into these interesting privacy binds. So you collected a lot of data in your report around how companies are relying upon third-party services for what they think they're relying on it for things like lead generation, but what are the implications of that for their own customers? And I think these are, when you talk about privacy awareness, I think these are the things that companies are being forced to now look at, right? Whereas before they didn't really look at it. They just said, well, yeah, we're going to advertise in these channels and get leads. But now there's this whole thing around what are the implications of that? And do you need to be making your customers aware of those practices and how that affects their data, right? I mean, isn't this is kind of unraveling a little bit, I think. What is your view on everything?
I think it's probably late in the unraveling. It should have happened earlier, but I think we went through the pandemic, and everything had to shut down from face-to-face shopping experiences, where you for a while there, you couldn't go into the market like you traditionally would. Some people go to the market, they use cash. They don't have a loyalty thing. So they could make purchases and nobody would know. But now everything is digital. If you couldn't shop the way you traditionally had to, you had to shop online, which means there's a digital pathway now. People know exactly what you're buying, when you're buying it. So it's creating all this data. And we all know the more we go digital, the more data that gets collected, the more it's going to be used. Sometimes the use is good. Sometimes the use is, the nefarious use. And then the other thing is, these companies sort of get addicted to having data, and they become more of an ad company than let's say a tech company. Before they were selling a platform, they were selling software. That software starts collecting a lot of data, and then all of a sudden they become an ad company more than they are a tech company. And, you're seeing more and more of that. And I think we're at a point now where, because of things like when Apple does something or Google does something or announce something big, it causes people to take notice, and that causes consumers to take notice. And now the consumers are being awakened to a certain extent, and that's going to cause ripple effects from everybody that they call a vendor.
Absolutely. If you are in the throes of this in your own company, love to hear about it in the chat to the degree you are willing to share that. So please vocalize and we will act on your comments. Reminder that when you post stuff in my chat, we talk about it. So please do it. Now, one of the things that I think is really interesting about this is, in my view, this kind of when GDPR came out originally, I think it kind of forced this issue around, are you going to wear a black hat or a white hat? I mean, I know the colors are weird because, it's like cultural, racial implications and stuff. So put that aside. But the point being, like, are you going to do right by your customers, or are you going to continue to kind of sleaze your way along in this fuzzy area, right? Because when you look at it, the companies that are in trust with customers do it in the right way, right? Like it's not like they don't get your data, but they get your data because you trust them. Right. I talk about it in terms of like a value exchange, and it seems to me that one of the implications here is you can't sit on the fence anymore, right? You can't kind of fuzz your way through this. You either have to say, look, we're scummy, we're going to get data however we can, and that's that, or we're going to do right. And it seems like if you're going to do right, why not get out in front of this a little bit more instead of being dragged along by, oh, here's another regulation, so now we need to change a little bit more. Here's another, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what? I think we got to look at this as a term, like an addiction. You know, these companies are addicted to this data, and it's hard to kick the addiction. You know, the addiction makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you've got everything, under control, but you're doing everything. You're stealing, you're causing trouble just to keep that addiction. And I think that's been the way that things have been operating up until pretty much this year. And it's going to be really difficult, for companies to kick the addiction if they feel like they are addicted, if they feel like they're doing wrong to keep this thing going. Some folks might not feel like they're doing wrong because, the payoff is too big. But I like, the idea of, companies use this software traditionally because it's good. It helps them do what they need to do, and they can trust it. But that was software that was installed on your machine, so you didn't really worry too much about, the purposefully data leaks. You had your security issues, you had your technical issues, but when the data was all on your own hard drive, you didn't worry about, this data leaking out, from a nefarious standpoint. But now that we're in the cloud, it's become such a big issue, but it became an issue kind of under the radar until this year. For some reason, this is the year that it came out. I don't know, or 2020 was the year it really started to come out. I don't know if it's because more and more people had to do things in an untraditional way, like shopping for groceries online, and that opened up kind of doing everything digitally. And now there's even more data, more privacy data, or more personal data. Like, we're using these devices, like you have your iPhone, you have your Apple Watch, it's collecting data on your health. That's, more and more of these issues just started coming to the forefront. And I think now you can't get away from it. You can't turn away from it. But what do you do if a company is kind of addicted to having this data and never having to ask for it before? You could always kind of take it under the table, so to speak.
We got Sandy Lowe chiming in. She liked my sleaze your way along phrase. Unfortunately, Sandy, I think there's a lot of companies that still fall in that description. Sandy from Zoho there, who actually has Brent taken credit for our relationship. So yeah, the fact that you and I have been collaborating on some stuff. So Sandy, take your props. I want to ask you a little bit further about this survey. It was interesting. Some of the goals you looked at, you really dug into whether your respondents understand third-party software and the implications of installing tracking software, the comfort level at how ad platform vendors explain this, because I think one of the things people don't always realize is how the ad platform vendors use data. In other words, you raised the issue earlier of like that do you realize that your customer data could become part of a marketplace, right? So that so an ad platform could take that data and package it up and actually sell it to someone else. Like, do you realize those things? So comfort level on how that data is being used. And so you guys conducted a survey around that, and you came up with a lot of interesting stuff, including like a data privacy confidence score. And you found some interesting findings as well. I won't go into all of them, but there seemed to be some level of knowledgeability around all of this. But I got the impression, though, that while there was a growing awareness, it didn't seem like a lot of companies had really figured this all out, because it seemed like they're still using a lot of these tools. They're kind of understanding it, but they're still kind of fudging their way along somehow. What did you come up with from that? Yeah, any surprises?
I think the surprise to me was, and we surveyed over 1,400 folks in the U.S. and Canada, and I think the main thing is there seemed to be a pretty significant comfort level with what was going on, and they also and this is all they're self-reporting. They self-reported how confident they are with using these platforms and the way that these platforms use their customer data, and they were pretty comfortable about their knowledge of these platforms. But I tend to believe that it's one of those, the less you know, the more you think you know. And then as you learn more, then you really realize, I don't know enough. I don't know enough at all. So I tend to believe that the scores that we got, for example, I did this like a tracking knowledge ratio. So just a blanket question around, do you know that, the stuff that you add, these, add-ons to your website or plugins, do you know that these folks are adding third-party trackers? There's almost a 6-to-1 ratio to say, yeah, we know it. I tend to believe that they didn't know it to the extent of which it was going on. So it'll be really interesting to see next year when we do this. I think we're at the end of this year, and then the report comes out next year, how that changes now that there's more information out. For example, there is a really interesting article that I was reading as we were doing this, and it was about an organization that was getting ready to put up a website. And the one of the key things they said is, this organization, we aren't in the tracking our website users. That's not what we're here for. We're not, trying to capture a lot of data around that. So, but they needed to make a website. And so they created the website using 3 known plugins. So they knew that they were using, a plugin for Facebook, a plugin from Twitter, and a plugin from Disqus for commenting. So what they didn't know is that although the Twitter and Facebook plugins, they didn't install any additional trackers, the Disqus plugin added 21 trackers, 21 trackers to 21 different data companies, which meant that data that was coming into their website, and that's all their website visitor data and whatever data, other stuff that got collected through forums and things like that. All of that was not only open to the Twitter and Facebook stuff, and the Disqus stuff, but through Disqus, 21 additional companies had access to it. So although they did not want to be they didn't want to track their users, the website, what they didn't know was that they were actually aiding and abetting 21 vendors who they had no direct relationship with, giving that their website visitor data directly to these 21 companies. And they don't know what's going to happen with that data. They don't have any direct relationship with it. So once again, that was a case of, yeah, we thought we knew, and then we found out we didn't know.
Which brings us to Alan's timely question. Have we passed the point of no return in terms of data and privacy?
I can't say yes to that, but I can say the longer it's out there, the harder it definitely gets. Because let's face it, almost to a certain extent, kind of the digital economy is based off of tracking. It's going to be hard to rip it up. But I think there's opportunities, for companies. There are some companies that did it from the beginning, said, hey, we're not going to do this out of the gate. So they're okay. And I think you see a growing number of those new companies created like that. But Alan does have a point. I mean, I think the longer you've been dependent on tracking, the harder their addiction is to get over. And it's not going to be easy. But as you said earlier, it might not be easy, but is it right? Is it the right thing to do for our customers? Is it the right thing to do for our employees who have to interact with customers and try to be truthful and transparent with them? If it means something to you for that to take place, then regardless of the difficulty, you're going to do it one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, Alan, one thing that I think about with your comment is, Brent, you referred to that sort of odd sense that companies in the survey that you looked at had a certain comfort level, perhaps, with how things are, but how quickly that changes, right? So in other words, like another regulation gets passed that changes how you use third-party ad platforms. Well, now they have to change their practices, just like, Chrome changing the cookie policy or the iOS change that you referred to. Or you get a nice juicy customer lawsuit, And so to me, once again, it just raises the question of whether you're going to be constantly chasing the stuff from behind and staying one step ahead of the sort of privacy pitchfork, or are you going to get out in front? And I think one really interesting thing about, like, my discussions that I've done, because I've written some data privacy articles around Zoho's approach in the past, and one provocative aspect, they talk a lot about the surveillance economy, and it's a provocative phrase, right? Because we don't tend to think about these tools as surveillance tools. But in a way, I think that language is quite important to ponder, right? Which is that, you are, in a sense, being surveilled, perhaps for the purposes of monetization rather than like more nefarious reasons, but you're still being surveilled.
Well, even that last example, even when the vendor, the folks putting up the website say our business is not, we don't want to track, we're not into that, that's not our thing. But if they use technology from other companies that does that sends that data to these 21 additional companies, who knows what they might do with it. So even when you think you're trying not to do that, or your intention isn't to do that, using a certain kind of technology from certain companies, you absolutely are, a surveillance aider and abetter, even if you don't mean to be and you don't want to be, which is kind of hard to get your head around, because your main objective is for one thing, and all of a sudden you're collecting and sending valuable data to folks that you don't even have a direct relationship with. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know how they're going to do it. It really does become, just a funnel, a data funnel with all sorts of data spilling out at the sides, and there are people there to collect it.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. The other really interesting thing about this discussion is that I think is slow moving at the moment, but I think will become more and more of a factor is you talked about this, you could call it digital exhaust, right? Like all the tools we're using create this constant digital flow, which then creates implications on who has access to that. And you think about it from an employer perspective, right? So the more I'm working in a remote capacity or in a hybrid capacity, I'm using all these new tools. Well, those tools also, for an employer, provide a really handy way of tracking me, my performance, my whereabouts. You can now judge me based on all kinds of metrics you could create. And one thing I mentioned in our last show is I was on a pretty high profile little private event for media with some big players. The Zoom CEO was there, some high level people from Salesforce. And I asked them, I was like, what are your obligations here to your own customers as far as how they're using these tools? Microsoft got into trouble for this. Like, they put out some stuff around their collaboration policies, and then they had to backtrack around what kind of data is being collected. And so I asked them, I was like, what are your obligations here for your customers? Because I think a lot of times vendors just say, well, our tools are neutral. But I'm like, well, what if you have a customer who's using those tools in a way that you don't agree with? That, like, do you have an obligation now to educate? At least, I'm not telling them to walk away from business necessarily, but are you educating your customers around that? And I think this is going to get really interesting, right? Because I think employees are going to start voting, at least the ones that have options are going to start voting with their feet and saying, I'm not comfortable with how this data is being used. So I think that's another interesting aspect of this discussion. And I know that Zoho spent some time on this also, because that's how I originally started thinking about it.
I think, the data discussion, it's open and it's going in all the directions that it probably needs to go. Like you said, the employees, you got work from home now. So everybody's using Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. And so there's a lot of discussions taking place, between, people working in the same company, partners working with their vendors, customers. I mean, so these conversations through all these collaborative tools are being recorded. They're being transcribed, and then they're being run through, sentiment analysis. So once again, things that happened when you were in the good old days of the pre-pandemic, where you had to go to the office and go to a meeting room, and then you talk, between yourselves, and you don't. Nothing is going on until somebody turns on a recorder or some sort. Now, when you jump on Zoom or something, everything is game. You're sitting in your home office. Anything that happens in the home is being. You can see it, so it's going to be used somehow. So, how should you handle these situations? Because they're only going to become more frequent. Do I want my everything I say transcribed? Every look on my face being, analyzed because you got facial recognition, and then you're going to start seeing, Brent made his right brow went up when this was said. We need to analyze it. Do we want that? I don't want that, and I want to know if that's taking place so I can say, well, I'll see you on the next one because I don't want to be involved on this one.
Absolutely. Alan points out a key element is permission. The default is yes. GDPR changes a bit. Alan and Brent brought up earlier about the iOS, where the default is now no, and you have to opt into services. And I think that's really interesting to start seeing that shift, because to your point, the default is yes. I think one of the problems, though, that persists is in the consumer space is these happy trade-offs that we make, right? Where, I'm on Facebook. I know that their terms of service are objectionable in many ways, and if I gave those terms of service to my lawyer, they wouldn't know what to do with them. They're not comprehensible, and yet I participate on that platform. And so I think these kinds of things are tricky, right? Did I really opt in? I mean, and this is where I think companies are going to hopefully feel a little more heat. And to your point, there are some folks trying to do things differently. I mean, I got pinged recently from some PR stuff. You referred to before our show about some new alliances that are forming around privacy-free search, privacy-first search engines and stuff like that. I've been seeing more and more of the data monetization schemes around, shouldn't consumers be compensated for their data, which is really interesting. And so creating networks where if you participate in this network, you're actually compensated for the use of your data. How many of those will actually work, I don't really know, but it's super interesting to reframe that discussion around actually that data has a financial value, and I should choose, when I broker it. Of course, there's all kinds of problems with that too, but it's interesting to have those discussions.
The other thing that's interesting too is the reason why Google had to kind of delay the phase out of the third-party cookies. They were trying to replace third-party cookies with this thing they call Flock. Was a federated learning of cohorts, something like that. So they're trying to remove the ability for folks to go one-on-one, take this data and use it from a one-on-one perspective. They try to abstract it and create what they call these cohorts. So they look at individuals browsing and where they go and what they do and any other information they can find, and then try to create a group of people that have similar kind of makeup, and then create a cohort, and then so that kind of gives you a layer of abstraction between the individual by saying, well, you can't have access to the personal information of the individual, but this individual fits this cohort, and here's kind of the data around the cohort. But the pushback came from other browsers and certain kind of websites, retail websites, to say this all seems to me to be putting even more power in the hands of Google,
right? Because
everybody right now, the whole system is built on the third-party cookie thing, and that's not something that's owned by anyone thing. But now you're going to replace that with this Flock thing, which is a Google invention. But it has to go. Everybody has to buy into it in order for it to work. But there seems to be a bit of a power struggle because companies are like, I don't think we should just replace something that we all are comfortable with something that is made by one company to rule. And that was the big pushback. It wasn't really about the privacy aspect. It was more about who's going to own the right to still run ads the way that that whoever wants to run them runs them, and whatever vehicle they want to have in there. Well, whoever has that potential to put that in place, does that again shift the power to them more than what's going on currently?
Absolutely. Zachary, earlier you said you have so many thoughts. We're going to probably wrap the privacy discussion in a few minutes, so love to hear a couple of those thoughts if you get a chance before we wrap up. I think that's really interesting, Brent. And when you look at the scrutiny that big tech is under for monopolistic practices right now, which is a growing trend from both the left and the right for different reasons, it's probably not the right time for Google to create what could be perceived as a monopolistic definition of data. And one would suspect that was part of the reason why they pulled back. But I hear what you're saying. And I think that cohort thing is really interesting because it's like, well, defining people based on cohorts is pretty tricky sometimes. Like, good luck defining me, for example. But actually, you scared me earlier too, because you started making me think, like, in 4 years, am I going to hear from like a Diginomica bot halfway through the day that's like, John, I noticed you're feeling grouchy today. There's been your smile ratio has gone down, and I've noticed an edgy tone in your email correspondence with your partners. Do you need to take a wellness break? It's like,
or
like
maybe
that.
Not even asking you if you need it, just say, we're putting you on a
wellness
break, John.
John, sorry you don't have access to your email or internet connection right now, but you were on a wellness break based on the sentiment that you've been displaying in your correspondence and in your interactions. I mean, and we can laugh about this a little bit, but this is kind of a real thing. And I think I feel for it because, in our industry, there's a whole lot of talk around like, for example, with hybrid work, it's like, well, people are going to vote with their feet, the talent will go elsewhere if your practices suck. And that's true for like top performers and people who are lucky enough to be sought after for whatever reason. But you know what? There's a lot of good people out there who are more stuck in a current situation than that. And it doesn't mean that they're mediocre. It just means that they're stuck for whatever reason. I feel for people like that because I think they're going to find that a lot of these tools that are so like you're saying, it's like there's a trade-off, right? And we're starting to become aware that the tools that we use every day and rely on come with all these trade-offs. And that goes for our workplace tools as well, So
yeah, the whole thing is there's kind of an easy fix to this, and it's just being open and being honest. We want to use your data. Yeah, it's going to help us out, but in return, it's also going to help you out. Companies got to get used to just being plain and speaking, frankly, and in a way that people could easily understand what's going on. And you might be surprised at how likely people are to say, okay, well, that makes sense. Bam, but they're so used to doing it behind the scenes or, making a change to their privacy policy that's, so hidden in the 30,000 pages that it was already there, that nobody's going to take the time to really look at that. All right, whatever. Now people are starting to take the time. And so it's time, time for companies to really rethink how they went about it. Hey, if you were riding dirty, so to speak, with your data privacy stuff, you got to realize that those days are probably over. So you're going to have to figure out a new way to communicate to customers and website visitors or whoever's data that you're looking to use. You're going to have to just say, look, yeah, we're going to do this with your data. We need it for this reason. Yeah, it's going to be good for us, but here's why we think it's a win-win and it's going to be good for you as well. I think you'll be surprised at how many people would be more open to that approach than finding out after the fact, oh my God, this is what's been going on for all this time.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like there's a transitional process, right? And the first step in that is that self-education that turns into transparency and disclosure. So you're trying to be as open and as clear as possible, not like some bizarre terms of service agreement, but like clear, here's how we use your data, thank you for trusting us with your data and so on. Right. And from there, let the informed person make a decision. I think, and there is more pressure on businesses. And I think they have to be careful because like, if you just derive comfort from the fact that like, oh, well, Facebook or TikTok or whoever, they're having fun with data. Yeah. But consumers are arguably kind of addicted to those services. And I don't think you could say the same about a lot of B2B services, right? It's like, I'm not addicted to that service. I'm actually going to be able to step back and evaluate that carefully. And if I don't like how you use your data, I may make a change. And I think that's a little bit different than like, where as a consumer, it can be very tough to move off of Facebook, for example, if all of your family are on there and you're trying to keep track of your grandmother's health and she's on there or whatever. Like that's a pretty like hardcore thing to step away from. I don't think that's true for a lot of enterprise services. It's a different set of criteria. So companies need to be careful about saying, well, consumers don't care. I think it's more that consumers feel this strong propulsion towards these certain services, and I don't think that companies should derive comfort from that is all. So
yeah, I think that companies have to realize, consumers are, as long as the consumers feel like they have more of a say, they're going to say, okay, I'm going to stay on Facebook because I understand it's I want to stay connected with my family. But they don't want a vendor to make that call on their behalf unless the vendor explains what's happening. I think that's kind of the biggest issue with the privacy thing is you're not telling folks what's going on. You're not giving the consumer the right to make the call. You're making the call on their behalf, or you're shielding them from some really important information to help them make the call. Those things have to change going forward, I think.
Yeah, I think just to add one more quick thing to the mix too, from a enterprise perspective, is this whole thing around APIs, because I think APIs are starting to get exposed a little bit. I mean, LinkedIn just had another breach that was based solely on information that was gathered from API usage, but savvy malware type individuals, for lack of a better word, can gather that data and concoct these pretty complete profiles of you based on those things. And again, it's going to come down to the fact that, well, did you really educate people on what kind of stuff is being exposed and under what circumstances, right? And how can that be used? And so I think these are good conversations, Brent. I mean, it can be confusing sometimes to wrap your head around all of it, but I'm glad that you guys pressed the issue on this. I think it's really interesting. So,
yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. And I think I'll go back to the more you know, the more you understand you need to know more, or the more you know, the more you understand, my God, I don't know as much as I thought I did. And I think we're all going through that now. And it's just the beginning of this conversation, I think.
For folks who want to catch you this week, do you have more stuff coming up? I know you usually have a Watching Amazon. Is that coming on Friday?
Well, so there's CRM Players tomorrow.
Okay.
And we're going to have Mike Fawcett and Jeff Workgall from Oracle and Mike Fawcett from Arion. He just started a new
gig
research company. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to have them on talking about the transition of buying power from baby boomers to Gen Zers. That's going to be pretty interesting. Then yes, Watching Amazon Friday at 5 p.m. And actually, we started something called Watching Privacy on Friday at 11 a.m. and it'll be me and Raju Vigezna and Tejas Gadja from Zoho. We're just talking about issues. We get a little deep, go into kind of some deep dives in some of this stuff. So yeah, it feels like I'm never not live streaming.
You are on the streams all the time. So before we wrap up, I do want to ask you about that. How do you know? Like, because this is so interesting as far as like, I think we all realize the importance of content to reach audiences and video, the importance of video. How do you know when you've had a successful video show? Are you looking at numbers? Like, how do you know, oh, that was a really good show? Like, how do you assess that? What is your personal subjective criteria?
So like I would assess this conversation. Am I interested? Am I really engaged in this? Am I enjoying this? And the answer to all three of those is yes. And so that's how I judge it. I mean, it's like we've been talking for like 40 minutes. It doesn't even feel like it's been nearly that long because the subject matter was good and the conversation was good. And the other thing I always look at is the engagement. We've got people commenting and making good comments. So that's also a component. And then also the kind of, I'll take a couple of clips, little two minute snippets of a conversation and toss those out there. because sometimes, long form conversations scare people off. But if they see, like a 2-minute clip of something, is a self-contained clip of, a totally well thought out piece of information or a really great part of the discussion, and that does well, and then that also leads to people circling back around and checking out the long form. All those things are kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I like that short clip mentality, right? Like I tend to reject the idea that people don't enjoy long form stuff, but I also embrace the idea of giving people as many options as possible, because it really depends on the person and the rhythm of their week and how they like to consume stuff. Sandy's saying you're always live somewhere and you're going to run out of Rams hats, dude.
Never run out of Rams hats. And you notice, John, this is a totally different one. And I broke out the Rams jersey for you too. Yeah,
I really appreciate it. As a Patriots fan, nothing makes me happier than seeing a bunch of Rams gear on it, dude.
I just walked right up into that one. So,
you did. You walked into it. In fact, you had a good show on that recently. I was cracking up because you were talking about like fans and apparel and stuff, and I was making the point that businesses can learn a lot from sports teams as far as the passion of the consumers, and like, gosh, if you could evoke that kind of passion for your B2B brand, like, now you're really on the way.
Yeah. Although I don't see myself wearing a jersey for Acme or something like that. But.
No, not at all. But it's interesting to think about how do you do it, right? How do you earn that kind of rabid loyalty? Are there things about that you could emulate? I think some are. Obviously, it's never going to be the same, right? Because sports are sports,
but you can learn stuff from them for sure. I mean, I learned some things. I was talking to Caroline Truelove, who's the head of global fan engagement for Fanatics. So I told her, I spend pretty much half my monthly income goes to buying Rams. So there's lots to learn. Fan experience and customer experience. There's a lot of equal, but that fan experience, I think, goes a little deeper emotionally, and there's some things that you could learn from that too.
Absolutely. Short form, like say a few good minutes. Yeah, the problem is that sometimes a few good minutes lead to a few more good minutes. So I think that's why Brent ends up like pulling out some of the highlight clips that are really funny. Like you had that great one with Esteban that you pulled out as a highlight.
Well, that picture.
Yeah.
Oh my. Well, yeah. Whenever you see Esteban and Alan Bondi hugged up on what appeared to be like a red carpet for a movie premiere, you got to ask them about it. I mean, you just got to kind of spring it on them. Like, I didn't tell him I was doing that, and you could tell by his reaction. See, that's the kind of stuff I'm going for when it comes to doing these. You don't want it to just feel like it's a scripted conversation or too much of a point count. You want to inject some kind of personality. You want to have some fun with it, because to me, the best parts of these conversations are the ones that you can tell were completely spontaneous and came about because the conversation is organic and you kind of let it go where it goes. But then you get a chance to dig in on something that just popped up, and bam, you got some good stuff.
Yeah, like when someone posts blockchain in one of my chats because they know it's going to push my buttons. Because block the use of the word blockchain is banned on my show. So people do that just to roil me. But yeah, I think to your point, and I wish that more vendors understood the power of those live moments. They're so afraid of them. And it was interesting because I got pulled into something this week where I'm helping out with a keynote discussion on video, and I'm going to be on this little mini discussion panel thing. And we were talking about rehearsals and stuff. And I was telling them, like, I recently did one of these things where we had 2 planning sessions, a rehearsal, a second rehearsal, and then 2 filmings or whatever. And I was like, with each subsequent edition, the content felt more and more canned, so the best discussion was the first one, but unfortunately nobody saw that one because it was just the brainstorming. But I was like, wow, that was gold, and And so to me, like what I like about what I've learned from watching you and what I try to do as well is like, yeah, let's not overdo it on the rehearsal part of everything. Like we might want to get on the same page in terms of topics we might want to cover, but let's flow with this thing a little bit. And like to me, that's the power. And like you said, maybe there's an additional power in then saying, oh man, that was 2 minutes. That was really magic. I think I'm going to pull that out and feature that separately as a shorter form chunk. So many opportunities that people haven't tapped into. So a lot of potential still. I mean, there's a lot of video out there, but I don't know if there's a lot of good enterprise video out there, I would say. So
I tend to agree with you. I think a lot of them are afraid to relinquish some control. And so they want to keep things very scripted. You know, they don't want any surprises. They want to know exactly what's being said. And, you know, me and Paul run into this a lot with CRM players. Well, we used to run into it a lot more than we do now. Like somebody would come on or we invite them on, and then their PR folks would get involved, and they would like to know, you know, do you have a list of questions ready? Mm-hmm. And can you tell us this, and we like, look, none of that's going to happen. Don't even bother asking. You part of what makes a good conversation is the spontaneity, but it's also, you know, we want people on that we feel like we have a pretty good understanding of who and what they are and what they do. And because we have a certain level of familiarity, let's say, you don't have to do a whole bunch of that stuff, man. I mean, mm-hmm. you can be real. And I think that's like what we're doing. We didn't have to go through a whole lot. We just basically a couple of texts. Hey, what do you want to talk about? Let's do that. Oh, okay, we'll do it. We'll use that as the bridge to the. We're good, you know, and it comes across as a regular conversation. But if it's too stilted or scripted, or tell us about people can pick up on that, and that turns people. At least it turns me off. It makes it less interesting if it feels like, you know, you might as well let's pull out your script and read it in front of me. Yeah.
Mm. Well, I'm glad that I think with shows like yours, I think more vendors get a chance to get a little more comfort level with that environment, which is great, because to me that's what gets exciting about what we could do with the enterprise, right? You know, I keep trying to tell people, like, there are no perfect projects. I mean, we in Diginomica, when our partners write stories about like customer products and stuff, the feedback that we always come back with is like, you didn't really touch on the challenges that your customer faced here. And it's like, every project had its moment of truth. Like, let's not kid ourselves. I don't care how great your software is. Doesn't matter. It's not about that. Like, right. Like there's always a moment of truth. And I think that's what people are looking for. And hopefully, Brent, we can have a quiet and steady revolution around this topic, because there's so much potential for this medium when you can just let it breathe a little bit. And so hopefully there'll be more of that. But thanks for leading that charge for us. Appreciate it. Learned a lot.
No, I like what you do with the hits and misses thing, because I mean you get out there and you let people know what's up. I mean, you're not agreeing with every guest you have all the time, which makes it more compelling to watch, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I tell my guests, like, because I mostly try to find people who are like, who I consider like very strongly independent, because I just feel like that's what's missing from most of the videos that I see. But I tell my potential guests, I'm like, you should watch one of these because it's kind of jugular, and just make sure that you're okay with that before we do this, because that's how it's going to have to be. And it's not like it always has to be that on every video show, because I don't think it's always appropriate, but it's like I feel a need for it. And you know, it's funny because we talked about sports. Like, a lot of what inspired me was some of my favorite sports talk radio shows where there are a lot of very heated arguments and discussions, right? Because that's what sports fans do, right? They argue about stuff. It's like, wait, you said Aaron Rodgers was better than Tom Brady. What the hell are you talking about? Tom Brady's 43, you know, but I don't care. He's still better than Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers chokes in the playoffs, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you and I could probably have that argument for the next 15 minutes.
I'm holding my tongue right now.
Yeah, so. There you go. Right. So, and I was like, well, what if you could actually do that on the enterprise topics, but like but not just like for the sake of argument, but for the sake of like better products. Anyway, so that's kind of like what I try to do. But I don't know. I think there's room for a lot of different approaches.
Yeah.
As long as it's just informal and not canned, it can be all kinds of different approaches can work. So.
Absolutely. I do my one-on-ones, my few good minutes. And, those are more, conversational. And then we have CRM players. And, me and Paul like to have fun with that. And we like to have guests that are fun. Although they're pretty high-level folks, they're still fun. Impromptu guitar playing is likely to come out, or, some kind of interesting joke or something.
Well, and
then I have watched, yeah.
Well, and sorry to cut you off. I think the other thing about CRM players is you cultivated a real community around that show, which is really interesting too. So in that case, you said, let's build a community around so it's not just, I'm going to go watch a show. People feel a part of the community around it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say about watching Amazon?
Oh yeah. Watching Amazon. That's where me and John Lawson go at it. I mean, we have fun. We've known each other for years. We're very comfortable with each other, and we're very comfortable telling each other we're stupid, and we get over it. But it's fun. It's fun, and I enjoy all the different kinds of conversations and it's really amazing how it took this pandemic and live streaming to actually help me come to that realization, is that I actually learn a lot more about people and things because of the different kinds of live streams I'm doing. And I think it's just great. It's helped me tremendously this last year and a half.
It's amazing what getting off the road can do to spark some creative change and everything. So it'll be interesting to see how you mix it up as a little more travel kicks in, even though, as you and I have discussed, I think that discussion is still a little premature. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of that this fall, but I've been thinking about it too. Like, am I going to do some video stuff when I'm on the road? And anyway, it's interesting, but I don't know. I mean, a part of me feels like in some ways the travel's overrated, in that like you're doing with the full plate of interesting video all week. Why leave? Why leave home? Anyway, it's just interesting. So,
hey, look, I know you're going back out next week, and I can't wait to hear kind of your experiences with that, because we're in the same boat in terms of we go to a lot of stuff. And so I'm really interested in hearing how you make out next week, and that'll help me to kind of, gauge what I'm going to do the rest of the year.
Indeed. Taking it month by month right now. So we shall see. Brent, pleasurable discussion. Thanks for joining. Much appreciated. I hope we hit the homicide law and order threshold. I didn't want to end up at the Ally McBeal practice level. So folks, hopefully we came closer to homicide law and order for you guys.
Please tell us we did, because I don't want to have that.
Yeah. Please don't use the words Ally McBeal pertaining to this episode, or Brent and I will have to reconsider our professional futures. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Take care, man. Thanks for having me.
Later.